Welcome back to... Oh, it's gonna be tight. Forest, Sporting, West Ham. Win, win, win. In the midst of the it's so over, we found the we're so back. Arsenal have clicked into gear and shown their level in recent games with the returning Odegaard, 11 men on the field, a bit of luck evening out, and a bit of fixture breathing space. Who could have predicted that? The Liverpool copium will come a little bit later, so if you want to hear that, then skip to the end. But for Arsenal, looking at the fixtures coming up, the fact we don't have to leave London, as I've said before, I think there's an opportunity now for a really good run. By the new year, my prediction is we'll be looking to make up 4 to 6 points on Liverpool. That's 4 to 6, not 46. We're back on track and we're looking good. But speaking of runs, something we're doing at the moment has really caught my eye. Bukayo Saka is in absolutely insane form. Incredible. I mean, pick your favourite stat. The first player in Europe's top 5 leagues to reach 10 assists, 20 goal-creating actions in the league, when the next closest is 10, 15 goal contributions in 12 Premier League games, 18 and 18 overall. Bukayo is the first player to have 3+ GA, win a penalty, create 4+ chances, and complete 4+ crosses in a single Premier League game this decade. There's literally nothing he can't do. Duels like a centre-back, tackles like a full-back, 1v1s like a peak 2000s winger, shoots like a 9, passes like a midfielder, joke of a profile. But for Saka to thrive, or indeed any winger in our system, he needs his teammates to help platform him. And that's just what we're doing. First, some theory. You might have seen this graph from Data Analytics EPL going around on X. What this graph shows is ball progression across the league in 24-25, defined as passes with a minimum forward movement of 10 metres, broken down by the zone of where the progression happens. Dark blue is the centre, orange on the flanks, green is the half spaces. As you can see, across the 20 clubs in the league, Arsenal had the lowest proportion of their ball progression going through the centre and the half spaces, and the highest proportion in the league going through the flanks. And while this has probably shifted a touch, because this was from before the break, as you can see in this graph, which is the same thing but from last season's 38 games, generally those proportions are about where we sit as a team, even over larger samples. Loads down the flanks, not much through the centre or half spaces, with only Luton having less central progression than us as a proportion of their progression last year, and we were again bottom for half space progression. Part of this is an ideological thing, part of this is the profiles that we have, and part of this is how teams set up against us. Naturally, you might think, well, that's not good, we're being forced wide. And I'd probably want a little bit more central progression just for my eyes. But when you consider Arsenal have the second most touches in the box in the league, all things considered this season, and we have no real issue with our ball progression over wider samples, you can start to think, fine, okay. Or panic, that's fine too. But Arteta has always placed a lot of emphasis on progression through the wide areas. He leans into it, and it works. Pep, for example, has a tendency to want to use the middle, as he explains in a widely circulated video that I've referenced before. But Arteta seems to want his wide players and fullbacks to be the progressors. And to be fair, when you spawned a £200 million talent from the academy, you spent all your money on fullbacks, and there's some kid from Brazil who turns out to be a superstar, fair enough. But because Arsenal regularly go there, it means we need to have clear strategy and automatisms when we do progress the ball through those areas. And folks, you guessed it, we do. On the tactics board, let's have a look at the idea. As the ball comes to the wide areas, the player in here, and I won't say the position because that's part of the idea, this player tends to make a run to affect the last line on the underlap between the centre-back and the full-back, or in this channel, certainly. Either the ball goes in there if the player keeps themselves onside, in which case the winger can run inside, or the winger simply uses the space that's been created to come inside with the ball. You might think, okay, but watch closely and you'll see other teams don't always emphasise this, especially with less wide progression. This is different from what Liverpool largely do, for example. Liverpool often look for the combination, the wall pass inside, and rely more on their wingers running in behind or just playing them earlier, like we saw in the goal against us, against Miles and Kivior. Still thinking about it? No! But we, especially with Saka on the right, but also on the left too, really emphasise the first movement. So, let's see it in practice. West Ham. Trossard has the ball, and as you can see here, Odegaard makes this run to affect the last line. As referenced, it can be the 8, but it can also be the centre forward, even a fullback making this run. It's the player who finds themselves here when the ball gets progressed wide, as I see it. And as we know in an Arteta system, that can vary, so it keeps opposition teams guessing and gives us different types of runs. Odegaard makes this run, and he actually goes offside, but that isn't the point. He's effectively, with one run, dragged the entire West Ham defensive line deeper on that side. And it gives you-know-who time to set and run at the defenders to cause his devastation. This time, ball goes into Ødegaard and it's overhit, but you see the idea. Same thing happens on the left-hand side. Rice knocks Trossard the ball, and as Wan-Bissaka waits to lock Trossard down, Rice makes the run, affecting the last line, and occupies him, giving Trossard some space to come inside. Sporting, right-hand side, Rice is there, which I like, by the way, I really like that freedom, and plays it to Saka before again making that run, affecting the last line. Saka, in this case, elects to go beyond, Rice doesn't quite reach it, but look at the space created inside for Saka, and look where the Sporting line gets dragged to. Left-hand side, same game, ball goes out to Martinelli and Calafiori busts a gut to get forward and push that line back for him. Eventually he checks his run because Martinelli doesn't use the space created, but the principle is again there. I'm not saying anything. And final example before I start boring you. Against Forest, ball comes out to Martinelli, Marino this time makes that same run, ball drops to Ødegaard this time, should probably do better. Obviously, there's always exceptions. It's not totally automatic. Here, Timber starts the run, then checks himself because he'd be more useful as an option for Saka in possession, but it's a way of affecting things out wide. And it's been incredibly effective in high leverage moments recently. We spoke about Timber's dummy run on the last video. This time the ball goes into the midfielder before coming back out wide to him, but the space is created the same way regardless. Again, 1-0 versus Sporting. Against West Ham, giving Ødegaard space here is criminal, but again, it comes from that same run affecting the last line with the ball out wide, this time from Havertz. He doesn't receive it, it's given to Martin, lovely little flick, cross to Trossard, 2-0 against West Ham. I remember when I wanted Buendia over Ødegaard. Oh dear, more like. Against Forest, Saka out wide, Ødegaard makes that underlapping run again, dragging Yates away. Ball comes to Partey this time, and you suspect that he would have been closed down by Yates were he not dragged. Instead, he has time to set himself, ball goes far corner, 2-0, game over. It's so simple, but it's almost indefensible if you get it right. And especially when you have a team like West Ham, whose lines move around more than a Friday night in Infernos in Clapham. That is a very niche reference. What it requires, though, is players who are unselfish enough to make those runs. The Timbers, Havertzes and Rices of the world, which we do have, and also wingers who can drive inside and make use of that space, which we have as well. Strong foot inside. It's a way of getting Saka and Martinelli inside, something many fans call for more of. And it gives the opposition a dilemma. They can't really win. Option 1, leave the runner. While shutting down the winger, you risk that ball getting slipped through to an unmarked man, or go with the runner and leave space for the now unmarked winger. Watch out for it next time we play. But I now want to move on to something else. Someone left a hilarious comment on my last video. You can pause and read if you want, but the long and short of it is apparently I'm profiting off Arsenal and making us lose because I'm revealing our secrets by posting videos like this. And personally, I make him sick. But here's the thing. Let's say a paid Premier League analyst couldn't work out what Arsenal were doing before watching The Different Knock. And let's say before I revealed this move, it was unstoppable, and now it's out in the world, it's completely stoppable, it will never happen again. It still wouldn't matter because we have so many other ways of affecting teams and it just depends on the day. This is just one way we break teams down, one movement that's really working effectively right now. But the trend will change pretty soon and there'll be another thing that heavily works for us for another period. The fact is, teams are definitely aware of this, but when you play with quality and variety, look at our set pieces, it doesn't really matter. Half-space crosses, shots from distance, height, set pieces, triangles, cutbacks, 1v1s. Apart from transitions, especially centrally, I think we basically have everything a modern team needs to break another team down. Sure, it won't always work, you won't always get the focus right on the day, but the amount of variety we have and our ability to execute is really exciting. What I find interesting about a lot of mainstream football analysis is the lack of attention on this stuff. What is actually happening in both the build-up and when teams are breaking down a block. It's either they're building up or they're trying to break them down, but never what or the how. And it really frustrates me because these guys must have spent hours and hours doing it. So what am I paying you for? Who or what is the trigger in the build-up to raise the tempo, for example? Why do this team insist on attacking the centre when they could work it wide? There must be a reason. And if it's not working, why is it not working? Is it execution or ideas? Take a team like Southampton. They're so interesting. And I'd love to hear more about that. Because we need to look at the patterns, the reoccurring things to work out if the problem is the ideas or the execution. As an example, we've changed our approach to breaking teams down slightly post-break, and I've not seen it highlighted. In these last few games, we basically stopped crossing into the box. 8 open play crosses against West Ham, 5 against Sporting, 6 against Forest. But before the break, it was 33 against Inter and 16 against Newcastle. So why is that? Are we just accessing the centre better? Is it different profiles available? Is it instructions? Regardless, it tells us where Arsenal are and how good they are. And I ask all this because in the ideas, you can usually find a team's level. If it's just a case of execution, not ideas holding you back, then something will almost always come if you add quality. But if an idea is fundamentally flawed, or you're not doing something because you can't do it as opposed to it being a choice, then it's going to catch up with you eventually. Teams who have the most ways to win usually do. And so, you probably guessed it, we come seamlessly to our Liverpool copium. I think Liverpool are a fantastic side. I truly do. Their attacking players are some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and ruthless players I have seen in the Premier League, full stop. But I can't help but feel they rely too heavily on the transition. Go and watch that game against Southampton. I don't think they played through their press without transition more than a handful of times. And then if you have a team with brilliant transition control who stops them doing that, as for example, Chelsea looking pretty good, Brentford are quite good at this, what happens? And what about teams who don't let them transition at all because they're sat so deep? Don't look at the result against Southampton, watch the game, and you'll see they can't play through them. I look at how deep Virgil and Konate sit at times, and I wonder if teams can exploit that, especially now the latter is out. I look at how they struggle with runs on the blind side through the midfield at times. I look at Andy Robertson being left 1v1, his form, and I wonder. I see how many times City gave the ball away, execution, despite having overloads all over the pitch, ideas. And if they had more dominant athletes centrally and executed better, could that game have gone different? The ideas themselves, I personally see some fault in. I'm looking for it, but I see it. And up to now, when there've been issues in our ideas, we've usually solved them, as we've explored so many times on the channel. And in every phase, I think we have something league-topping when we execute it properly. So, all that said, I have hope that when their hot streak dies down a bit, things will begin to unravel a bit. Look, maybe I'm wrong. Someone watching this probably thinks I'm totally wrong, and that's fine. Completely fine. Please address me on the things I've actually said, but fine. Genuinely fine. If Liverpool make it through this year unscathed, I will have been wrong about something. It's very possible, I know, but it's December. There's such a long way to go. We're only just over a third of the way through the season. And that goes both ways, by the way. We might develop some unforeseen issues we can't fix. Liverpool might allay my doubts. Let's see. There's so much football to play. But if I see fault in the ideas, in football, you usually get found out. Regardless, here's hoping. Till then, we focus on ourselves. We keep going and we go game by game. There might be some of you defeated after that result on the weekend, but chin up, there's a long way to go. If you like The Different Knock, you can support us on Patreon monthly, or you can buy us a coffee.